any writer knows that you've got to work at the craft. So you got to keep learning. One way that you do that is by reading other writers. Everybody is getting ideas from somewhere on how to write a scene or how to develop a character. And so good writers are really strong readers. So be a good reader, write what you're passionate about, and keep at it.
That was Sharon Tubbs sharing her advice to young writers. Stay tuned to hear more about Sharon's journey as a writer on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We will be back after the intro. Welcome to the Local Author Podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community and highlighting their unique voices and perspectives. Today's author guest is Sharon Tubbs. Sharon is an inspirational speaker, a nonprofit leader, and the author of 5 books. The print version of her latest work, They Got Daddy, One Family's Reckoning with Racism and Faith, was released in January 2023. The audio version was recently released in March 2024. They Got Daddy is a memoir that deals with issues of white supremacy, racism, and cultural trauma across generations. Sharon is a keynote speaker and has conducted workshops for beginning writers and faith or life empowerment groups. By day, she is the executive director of Health Visions Midwest, where she oversees community health workers in Fort Wayne and Hammond, Indiana, as well as in East St. Louis, Illinois. The organization empowers underserved residents to live healthier lives physically, mentally, economically, and spiritually. Sharon herself is a certified community health worker and has a master's degree in human services counseling. Her bachelor's degree in journalism from Indiana University Bloomington served her well in her previous career as a newspaper reporter and editor for 17 years. She is a Fort Wayne native, but spent the bulk of her adult life in Florida before moving back to Indiana several years ago. Welcome to the podcast, Sharon. We are going to begin with you sharing a reading from your most recent work, They Got Daddy, One Family's Reckoning with Racism and Faith. But first, a little about the book. January 15th, 1959, a day that changed one family forever. White supremacists kidnapped and severely beat rural Alabama preacher Israel Page, nearly killing him because he had sued a white sheriff's deputy for injuries suffered in a car crash. After They Got Daddy, Israel Page's children began leaving the Jim Crow South, the event leaving an indelible mark on the family and its future. Decades later, the events of the day fueled journalist Sharon Tubbs' epic quest to learn who had gotten her mother's daddy and why. They Got Daddy follows Tubbs on her moving journey from Fort Wayne, Indiana, to the back roads and rural churches of Alabama. A powerful revelation of the sustaining and redemptive power of faith and unflinching testimony to the deeply embedded effects of racism across the generations. It demonstrates how the search for the truth can offer a chance at true healing. Sharon, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction and the reading of the book. Thank you. Yeah. I really appreciate that. It's interesting to hear someone tell you who you are, your own bio, and talk about the book. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, Megan, and Allen County Public Library.
You betcha. We're happy to have you here.
So I thought in the short time that we have, I would just read actually the very beginning of the book. Okay. So this is from chapter 1 called Gone, Just Gone. He didn't cozy up to them right away that day. Not likely. Not for 2 strangers who weren't from around these parts. He kept his distance. There on the porch, content to peer at them, offer his typical greeting for white men. Boss? They were looking for a man called Israel, they told him. Israel Page. Could this have something to do with the court case? The possibility had to enter his mind. It was January 15th, 1959, 4.5 years since the accident and the injury, since he could drill a well and bring home a decent paycheck. In some ways, he had recovered. He'd gotten his mind back, his thinking straight, and he could still preach, that's for sure. But he'd lost a lot, too. His arm hung limp at his side, useless as a loaf of hoghead cheese. Still, there was a measure of courage to him. That's what it took. Courage. For a Negro to go up against a white sheriff's deputy in Alabama over the whole thing. Now, in less than 24 hours, Israel Page would get the trial he'd waited for. And he expected justice to side with him. With all that in mind, compounded by the racial tensions of the day, it's a wonder that he let his guard down at all, that he opened up to those white strangers the way that he did. But indeed, he did. Faith assured him that the Lord lingered near. He trusted God to protect him with the kind of trust that drives all the fear out of a man, and some might say a little of his common sense, too. Whatever the reason, he told the men that if they were looking for Israel Page, they'd found him. You could imagine their relief, since they'd searched all over Browns and Uniontown by then, driving through backcountry roads. They didn't live in this town, they said, and they heard he preached to the Negroes. That's how the conversation started anyway. He told the men about churches nearby, talking easily and for a good while, as he was known to do, and somehow the conversation turned to hunting dogs. He knew everything there was to know about hunting dogs. He had a few good beagles of his own, and he let them loose and followed them into the woods to sniff out the scent of easy prey, rabbit, coon, or even squirrel, which his wife Margaret turned into dinner. That's when the men told him about a beagle they had. Matter of fact, they said, it was out there in the car, parked over there by the road. Would he like to come out? Take a look?
Thank you for sharing that reading with our listeners. Before we begin, I want to read 2 of the Amazon reviews I found. One reads, an exceptionally well-written, organized, and presented combination of Black history and biography. They Got Daddy, One Family's Reckoning with Racism and Faith is a compelling story and one that is especially and unreservedly recommended. That's from the Midwest Book Review. And then the senior editor of USA Today, Kelly Benham French, writes, a gorgeous and haunting book spun so carefully you can smell the dirt roads and the shirt starch and the bologna sandwiches. You hear the poetry in the voices of the characters. You feel how suddenly darkness drops and meekness strikes, and how steadfastly the family of Preacher Page leans on its faith, a triumph of reporting and storytelling. I was riveted by the book.
Oh, wonderful.
I read it quickly, preparing for the podcast. It's just full of important information. I really feel like everyone should read it. When I just can't imagine what Granddaddy Page must have endured directly following the car accident, and then the beating that came later,
right?
And just being left in the woods. You've really given readers a gift by allowing us to access this very personal story, and what a gift to your family members. Because family history is so important.
Yes.
And stories get lost in the passage of time, and you've made sure this story won't be lost.
Yes.
So why was it important to you to tell the story of Granddaddy Israel Page?
Right. Well, I mean, I think you kind of hit on it when you said that it's important that this story didn't get lost. That was my main goal. I didn't want my grandfather's story and the journey that he had taken in his life to get lost. And it was almost lost. It was just one more generation, and we wouldn't have known about this. I talk about this a little bit in the book about how I actually came to know. It wasn't as though, my mother, his daughter, was talking about this, or my uncles and aunts, were talking about this at our annual family reunions. I was sitting on the couch with my mother in the 1980s, I believe, here in Fort Wayne, and we were watching the news, and I was a little girl, and on the news there came a news story about the Ku Klux Klan wanting to demonstrate or protest in some area of Indiana. And I was surprised by this news story because I went to Forest Park Elementary School, and, I had white, classmates, and we were friends, and the principal and counselors I liked, and teachers. And so it was an integrated school because of busing. And so I asked my mother, those scary men with the white sheets, they're still around. I'd seen them in the documentaries and the Martin Luther King films and whatnot. And she said, yes, they are. They got Daddy. And so that was the first time that I had any inkling that anything awry had happened to my grandfather. Okay. I didn't know my grandfather. I knew him. He died when I was 7. And I recall him. But by that time, he had what we think now is dementia.
Sure.
And never really had a conversation with him or knew much about him other than that, he was a preacher at one point. And so this thing with They Got Daddy really intrigued me even as a little girl.
Sure.
Yeah.
It stuck with you that long that
yes.
And then, so when did you start to learn more about They Got Daddy, about what happened? I mean, were you young then, or was that a few years later?
Well, it was gradual. So as I asked my mother then, what do you mean they got daddy? And she told me a little bit about what she remembered, but she didn't remember all of the details because she was a young girl herself. She was in her early teens when this had happened to her father. Mm-hmm. And it was a situation that no one wanted to hold dear. They wanted to forget about this. This was very traumatic for the family. And so when she kind of hesitated, I got as much information out of her as I could. And then as I grew older, mm-hmm. in college and as a young woman, by this time I was a newspaper journalist in Florida, then I would begin to interview, so to speak, my uncles and aunts about what happened to my grandfather. Just gradually. It was a very touchy subject, mm-hmm. as well as my grandmother. Mm-hmm. For a time, she did live in Fort Wayne with us, or with my parents, and so I would talk to her a little bit, not, again, something that she wanted to talk about. But I began to eke out these details here and there. And then at one point, one of my uncles just happened to mention that there was a lawsuit attached to this, that my grandfather actually sued someone. And so then my journalism instincts kicked in. And I was like, oh, my goodness, there's a paper trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so from that paper trail, I went on a research mission to Selma, Alabama, and found the actual court case. And from there, all kinds of documents just became available to me, especially mm-hmm. in the latter years. It just went on from year to year to year. I've just grabbed a little here, a little there one year, then put it down for a few years and come back to it. Mm-hmm. And when I really, really got ready to write it, did a lot of research right here in the Allen County Public Library in the genealogy section.
Sure.
And got, just loads of information of what happened from newspaper articles and other things.
Sure, absolutely. So when did you get really serious about, I know I read that in the book, you said you kind of went back and forth with it. You'd pick it up, you'd put it down. You'd pick it up, you'd put it down. But when did you really just decide, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to do this. I'm going to button it up and get it out?
I think I felt like I had enough information and enough time right around 2019, 2020. And by then, like I said, I had gotten more information, had become available online from various newspapers around the country.
Sure.
And I had gotten a lot of information from here. And I decided to create a proposal for a publisher. And so I had an agent. Mm-hmm. I got an agent, and then the agent and I worked to get a publisher. Okay. And we wound up getting a deal with Indiana University Press, which published it under one of their affiliates, Query Books.
Sure.
And so we got that ready to go. And once we got the deal going, then I had to finish writing the book.
So then you were on a time crunch. You needed to get it out there. So did you query an agent then? And like when you sent them,
yes,
that was you querying the agent. Did you only pick one, or did you try to do several agents?
Yes. So I queried several agents. I got I got an agent that I really liked, Amanda Ledecky. Mm-hmm. Who was also here in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
And so we began working together with McGregor and Ledecky.
Okay.
And she began then to pitch the book to various publishers in the industry.
Okay. And so did you do that in person with the agents, or were you able to do that online? I know some people go in person and do it that I've talked to.
Oh, well, I sent proposals out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Online. And then once, Amanda and I did meet up.
Okay.
Since she's local and I'm local, we did meet.
Okay. So how long was the time period between you finished up writing the book and then you had the finished book in your hand? How long did that take?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, so we sealed that deal, I think, in 2021 around the summertime, and then I had to finish writing the book, and then they had to edit the book, and then they had to re-edit the book, and I had to write some more and then re-edit, and then it was released in January 2023, and I probably got it about a month earlier, yes.
Okay. So did you design the cover, or did somebody...
Oh, no. I wish I could design like that. Yeah. But
is that you at the top there?
These
are
me.
Personal family photos.
These are, well, the top photo is not a family. That's a photo that someone took of me at church, because the book does deal a lot with some spiritual aspects, as my grandfather was a church pastor. So I gave Indiana University Press photos. I gave them some ideas. I had an idea about the cover being somewhat of a collage. And so I gave them the photos, and they worked with them to create, which I think is a pretty stunning cover.
It's striking.
Yes.
For sure. So there's a for those of you who don't know what the cover looks like, there's a house on here. Is this the house where the kidnapping happened from, or is this the house that he built with his sons? That's the house that he built later on after the kidnapping that I remember when going down to Alabama with my parents. All right. Very good. So, and you mentioned that this was put out by Query Books.
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
Yes.
And then that is a traditional publishing house under IU, Indiana University?
Yes, that's one of their publishing houses.
Okay. And like we mentioned earlier, you do have other books that you've released through the years. You have 5 total, but you've done traditional publishing and self-publishing.
Correct.
Can you speak to the differences between those two types of publishing?
Sure. So at the very base level, the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing is that with a traditional publisher, you have a publisher who purchases the rights to distribute your book. Okay, so they buy the distribution rights from you. Okay, you can still maintain the copyright. Okay, but they buy the right to distribute your book, and they pay you, right? Okay, so they pay you something. They may pay you in advance, or they may give you royalties based on the sales of the book. So that is at its very core level the traditional publishing market, which has been around, for years and years and years and years and years. Self-publishing is different in that self-publishing, I maintain the rights to distribute as well as the copyright, and I pay someone to put the book together, to edit it for me, to make the cover, or what have you. So I am the one that is creating the book. I have the financial investment in the book. Okay,
sure.
So and it's a little bit tricky these days because there are companies out there that some people think they're going to a traditional publisher, but they're not.
Okay.
And back in the old days, they used to be called subsidy publishers. But these are companies that you pay to do it for you. So in other words, I don't have to hire somebody to do my book cover or hire somebody else to do the editing or whatnot. I can go to one company. Okay.
That's a subsidy.
Yeah, it used to be called that. I'm not sure what, know. But you pay this company, and they will do it all for you.
Okay.
Okay, and they may say that they've selected you. You may even, send them a proposal, and they may say, yeah, we like this book, and we'll accept your money.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. But
there's
it's
nothing
not
wrong.
Exactly what people are expecting sometimes.
Well, some some people may be expecting it, but it's not a traditional publishing house.
Got it.
You see what I'm saying? So when you're putting money out, that's not traditional publishing. That's the basic way that I can say it. And I've done both.
Okay. So you mentioned before with the traditional publishing, they may give you an advance or they may pay you royalties. That's something that they lay out up front with you in like a contract?
It's a contract. So that's why you need an agent.
Okay.
The agent can negotiate the contract for you.
Okay.
You see? So that's what happened with They Got Daddy. I had an agent, and she negotiated with IU Press for our contract. And then that was all laid out ahead of time, and then it got published, and I didn't pay anything.
Okay. Great. Thank you for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense. Yes. So do you work with an editor, or is this something that you went through that whole process? Gave you the editor?
Yes, they have editors of their own.
Do it themselves.
Yeah. Now, I could always choose to have another editor, right? I could have chosen for someone, which I actually wanted to and tried, but it didn't work out in terms of the time. But I can have anyone edit my book and then send it to them. But the publishing house is going to have their own editor usually, and then they have an acquisitions editor who's read it in the at the beginning to see if they actually want the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So they're going to have acquisitions editors. They're going to have line editors who will do all the commas and the quotation marks and all of that. So the book is going to go through several rounds of editing.
Okay. All right. That sounds very detailed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they want to be detailed. But now with self-publishing, I always I used to do these writers' workshops for people so that they would know the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing and all of this. And so there's a lot to it. But with self-publishing, I always recommend that people hire their own editors. Hire an editor, someone, not your mother, not your best friend, who's going to say, "Oh, this is wonderful, this is great." Hire someone who actually is an experienced editor, and that can be kind of pricey. But that's one of the costs associated with self-publishing, because you don't want to have your book out there and then people find all kinds of things. Maybe it doesn't make sense here and there. One thing I've learned as an author is that humility is underrated.
Okay.
You got to be humble. Not that you want people to change your whole idea or anything like that, but you've got to be open to see how people are interpreting your work.
Sure.
And is it the way that you wanted them to? Now, you can't control people's, what people think about it.
Right.
But in terms of, did I make the point here?
Right.
Is the scene clear? That's
Absolutely.
what you want to do.
Okay. So what is your writing process like when you were writing this book? Did you, once you knew you had that deadline, were you sitting down with it every single day? Half days? Did you do other things in between? Because you have a full-time job, right?
I do.
Yeah. So you're a busy gal.
Right. And so I'm not the perfect role model when it comes to consistency.
Okay.
With my writing, I usually did like weekends. All day. I mean, the people at Panera Bread know me by name. Shifts would change. People that
know your order.
Sharon. Yeah, and then other people would come in. But I'm the one sitting there with my laptop, going over everything. Or, if I had an idea at night, might wake up and say, "Oh, I've got to do this with the Granddaddy story," and I'll put it in my phone. Of course, when the deadline was looming, I would be that person, at nighttime and early in the morning before going to work to do it. But I can't say that I had a steady routine. That's just not kind of my personality, where I'm the person who got up at, 6 and worked till 8 and then went to work. It's just, when I needed to.
Absolutely. Did you know that you were going to do the moving back and forth because it moves back and forth, one chapter's the past and then you bring it more into the present. Did you know you were going to have that format when you first started writing the book?
No, actually, because when I first started writing the book, I think the first scene was written easily 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. At that time, I was just planning to write about my grandfather, just my grandfather's story. And I went to a writers' conference. And in this writers' conference, I was telling people about some, other publishers and agents about the book. And several people gave me the suggestion that I needed to have more of me in it, and that I needed to bring it up to, to the current times.
Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
I didn't want to do that initially. I wanted to just keep it on my grandfather, but the more I thought about it, and the more race began to play a role in our everyday lives, again, at the forefront. And it plays a role, I believe, in our lives. But
yes.
Race came to the forefront in 2021.
It did.
With, George Floyd and all of those things. There were protests here in Fort Wayne. It became even more clear that, I've got to, while I'm chronicling, what happened with my grandfather, I've still got to talk about my own impressions of racism and my own experiences with it. And so, yes, the book does go from one chapter or two with my grandfather, and then it talks about my life growing up in Fort Wayne and racial experiences that I've had. So they intermingle.
Did you find it healing at all to write the story down or to put the words out there?
Yes, I actually did. And I didn't really expect that. But when I would, be typing a scene about something that I had experienced as a young girl, or, something in my memory as a journalist. And I would start crying.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where that was coming from. And I'm like, why am I crying right now? And it would just show me that there were some unhealed spots inside of me, some places inside of me that hadn't healed, that I didn't know that needed to be healed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The towards the end of the book, I believe, is when you talk about it, when you were the young reporter in Florida, and you had to go to the KKK rally, and you walked up and you spoke to the man in the white outfit, and I can imagine that was very brave. And did that scare your parents? Did you tell people that you went up and asked them a question? As a parent, were they like worried? I don't know, that must have been such a hard thing.
Well, yes. So just to set the scene for listeners, I was in my early 20s, and I was a reporter.
You were young, 23,
yes,
right?
Yeah, I was a reporter in Florida, and I was assigned to cover a Klan rally because I was the only one on duty that day. It was a Saturday, and they had heard that the Klan was going to protest, and there had been some race riots in the city for some time following the murder of a young man named Tyron Lewis by a police officer.
Are we allowed to know what year this is? What year was that? When you went to the Klan rally? You were 23, but what was the year? Was it like 1991?
I cannot recall the year off the top of my head. I think it maybe 96.
Okay.
I can't recall.
So recent history.
Is it? Yeah.
This is not that long ago.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I went to cover the rally, and as a reporter, I need to get both sides. And so I, was hesitating and really trying to not get both sides, because the side was the men marching in full Klan regalia, with the hoods on, and just their faces showing. And so I eventually did walk across the street and asked the guy what his name was and why they were there or what have you. I can't remember the full question, but it was very nerve-wracking and scary for me. And I did not tell my parents. That's your question.
Yes, that was my question.
That's the answer to your question. I did not tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone, actually, what happened. Because I was afraid, I was ashamed of my fearful response. And so I kept that inside. But when writing this, it was a release for me to finally say, you know what?
Yeah.
Hey, I want to give myself some grace.
Absolutely.
There was nothing wrong with being scared. These guys were terrorists, you know, especially in the early 1900s. Yeah.
Absolutely. So was your family supportive of you telling the story of Granddaddy Page?
Some members did. Some could have done without it.
Okay.
So it was something, again, that had been very traumatic, and some family members just didn't want to go back there, you know.
Yeah.
And that's true for a number of, you know, a lot of people. They don't want, why go back there to this trauma? Why revisit it? And my answer to that is because I question that myself.
Right.
You know, why do I feel so compelled to reveal this? I knew that I had to do it. I knew that I was called to write the story. But the answer is the healing that I experienced.
Yeah.
While writing it. So I answered the question that I was asking myself during the writing of the story. Is it okay to write this? Should I be writing this? That question was answered as I was writing it because I have to write this.
Right.
That's where the healing is.
Right.
Because there were things that I thought didn't need to be healed and there was nothing to heal. But then the healing came. And so now it's like all better. Like, oh, this has to be told. Yeah. So some people in my, you know, of course, my mother, father, yes, they wanted that. They were proud, but some people weren't. Yeah. Just because it was taking them back to a place that they would rather forget. Did I want people to be stirred up? Yes. I want more people to be stirred up. Go out and get the book.
Do go out and get the book. It is an excellent read. I read it so quickly. I can't recommend it enough.
Thank you.
What was your least favorite part of writing the story, if you had a least favorite part of writing it?
I would say the fear of getting something wrong. So as a journalist, you know, my fear always when I wrote a story, especially one that was significant in terms of, you know, making an impact or some impression, I would just be so nervous that, oh my goodness, I hope I didn't get this fact wrong. I hope, you know, and have to do a correction or whatnot. Well, this is a story that is very dear to me and to my family members and my grandfather. So I didn't want to get anything wrong. So that was the fear of that. So I had to do my due diligence as much as I could to make sure that what I was presenting was factual.
I can understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did anything surprise you as a result of writing the book?
The number of people who were affected by it in the ways that they were affected by it. So I've gotten, you know, letters that people have written, handwritten letters.
That's kind of nice. Handwritten letters kind of nice, right?
Yeah. I've gotten handwritten letters. I've gotten emails. I've gotten people who said that the book just really gave them a different outlook on race, on religion, and just helped them to see things in a different way. And these are not necessarily people who have had, you know, their head under a pillow or what have you. But the impact that it has had on those who have read it has been really enlightening for me and inspiring for me as a writer.
Has anybody from in that area in Alabama reached out to you? Have you heard from any locals down there?
No, I have not.
I did wonder about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it does, like you said, it does name names based on newspaper articles. So,
And you did try to reach out to the one guy's son, and he was not interested in really talking at all.
Right.
The lawyer's son?
Yes, the lawyer's son. My grandfather's lawyer had a son, and he did not want to talk about it. Later on, I could see why, probably. If you read the book, you'll understand. But I reached out to a number of people in Alabama regarding the book, and didn't get replies. And I'm not exactly surprised by that, because a number of people don't necessarily, like I said, want to go back to that time.
It wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Really. Just a generation removed.
Right.
I did really love the Radford family.
Yes.
And actually your granddaddy, that's where he went when he kind of he got oriented after he'd been left in the woods. And then next morning when he woke up, he went to that man's house, and that man, Radford, drove him part of the way home and really tried to help him, I think.
That was one of the treasures of the book, I think, that family members weren't aware of either. So my grandfather had worked for many, many years, since he was a boy, a teenage boy, for the Radford family, which is a white family that owned a well drilling company in
and they were kind of affluent, maybe, a little bit?
Yes.
That's where he learned to eat his eggs a different way?
Yes. That's where he learned that he liked runny eggs, which I despise, but he did. The yolk, runny, But anyway, one of the treasures of the book was finding out from Cecil Radford's son, Robert Radford, who I actually met and interviewed, that there was a really tight connection and close bond between my grandfather and his father, Cecil Radford, who was one of the pioneers of that well family. And that they really respected one another, and that my grandfather went to their house, and he would eat at the breakfast with them at the table along with some of the other workers, and that he was well respected as one of the managers or leaders of that company, and knew really how to dig the well, and when they drilled far enough into the soil, and all of that. And so I don't think anybody in my family, one of my cousins read it, they didn't know that bond existed. And so when my grandfather was kidnapped and did survive, he walked around, and at some point he got his bearings and realized that he was close to the Radford home, and went and knocked on the door, and Cecil Radford did care for him and took him to, near home, to where my grandfather asked him to take him. So that, like I said, that interracial friendship, even in the 1950s in Jim Crow, Alabama, was one of the treasures of the book, because you begin to see, hey, people are the same. In spite of our skin color.
Absolutely.
We can still be friends and love one another. They were doing that back then. They just weren't doing it as pronounced, as we can do it today. But we can still be friends and love one another and care for one another.
Absolutely.
Even in these trying times of division.
I agree. I was amazed when I was reading the story of Granddaddy's kidnapping. I hope it's okay that I've been calling him Granddaddy this whole time.
Of course. Okay. That's what I called him.
Okay, good. Of his kidnapping, that he, from what I read, he stayed so calm and he knew where he was for the longest time, because they had his face pressed to the floor, but he knew those roads so well. He knew kind of where he was going, and he recognized the one man's voice. And I was so impressed that his state of mind, that he could stay that present. I think I would have just passed out. I don't know that I could have stayed, that lucid to say, hey, I know that man's voice. Hey, I know what road we're on.
Yeah.
At some point he did kind of eventually lose his way a little bit, and then when they took him into the woods. But I was just impressed by his ability.
Yeah.
The recall.
Yeah. I mean, he had been in that community. That was the only place where he had lived. He grew up in that area, in that Browns Uniontown, Alabama area. And so when they kidnapped him and took him down and pressed him to the ground so that my uncles didn't even see him in the cars, or cars passed, like most likely, he knew where he was. Mm-hmm. He knew where he was. Now, I don't know if I'd say he was calm, but he had the presence of mind.
Right, the presence of mind.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, to know where he was in those backwoods. And they had gotten lost.
They
getting
did,
back
yes,
there.
yes.
Yeah, to find him, to kidnap him. So, yes.
Oh, the meanness. You know, they walked up on that porch and they were so kind and like so congenial and nice, and then they just flipped.
Yes.
Just
posing as ministers.
Yeah, and it just stood out to me when that happened.
Yeah. But that's one of the areas that I did want to hit on, that they were posing as ministers. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that my grandfather moved forward with the case in the first place that led up to this kidnapping is his faith. And that faith was something that has filtered down through our family line. And so as I was reading this, as I was writing this, rather, and then reading it, I was wondering the impact or what this would say about faith. Because my grandfather, he pursued this lawsuit thinking that, you know, God would be on his side and that he would be victorious because he was in the right.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
He was, yeah.
You know, it's justice. And so where does faith play a role in people's lives when it doesn't turn out the way that you thought it would? Mm-hmm. And so that was something that I wrestled with because I'm a very spiritual person of strong faith. What happens when things just don't turn out the way you thought they would?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think if Granddaddy had pursued the lawsuit, do you think it would have turned out in his favor, or would more bad things have happened to his family?
I don't know.
Because he was.
No, but now, Megan, you're giving away the end of the book here.
I know. I gotta stop. I gotta stop talking. We want you to go get the book.
Or come to the library and read a copy.
Yes, that's right. That works too. So I want to change tracks a little bit. And what advice could you give young writers just starting out?
I would say write what you are passionate about, and keep writing and keep reading and keep working at it, because too many times when I told you I used to do writers' workshops, people will, especially with vanity publishing or self-publishing, the growth of that industry, people will write books and think that, you know, their first draft is going to be the book. Even though they're passionate about it and they wanted that, you know, it's perfect. But any writer knows that that's not true. Mm-hmm. Any good writer, that you've got to work at the craft, you know. So you got to keep learning, you know. Mm-hmm. And the way that one way that you do that is by reading other writers and knowing, okay, this is let me see how this person handled this material, the material that they have. Not that you're plagiarizing or doing anything like that, right. But, you know, everybody is getting ideas from somewhere on how to write a scene or how to develop a character. And so good writers are really strong readers. So be a good reader, write what you're passionate about, and keep at it.
So what's next for you? I know that you're busy with your day job. Do you have any plans to write in the future? Yes.
And so this book, They Got Daddy, really got me thinking about my journalism roots and wanting to go back there. So I have another story, someone else's story, that I would like to write. And so I've actually started that story. Or started researching that story. So I'm looking into that. I can't say what yet, but it's going to be deep as well in terms of the story that this person has to tell.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to do that. And then I want to do some more audiobooks.
So did you read the audiobook for They Got Daddy?
I did.
Oh, man, I know I want to listen to it.
Yes, so I did read the audiobook, and I actually did a little singing in there. And I'm not a singer, so I had to practice. But
I was, you. That's awesome.
Right, because I wanted to do the audiobook because I know the flavor of many of the stories that I was telling in the book. Mm-hmm. And some of those have, songs that my mother would sing in the kitchen that, her mother would sing. About this world being a mean world to live in, mm-hmm. And so I wanted to give the audio book that kind of flavor. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. And it was a really great experience. So I really like that. Mm-hmm. So I want to do more of that. I want to actually do a screenplay. And which may be of They Got Daddy, we'll see.
That's really great.
I have big ideas, big vision.
I like it.
But it's all about this message that They Got Daddy carries, and I believe that message is one of the messages in that book is about how looking at our past can be a healing agent for where we are now, our present, and our future, mm-hmm. especially in these times when we are so divided. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could ask your granddaddy one question, what would it be?
If I had to ask my grandfather a question, if he was here, I think I would ask him how his faith mm-hmm. carried him through.
Yeah.
What he thought about God after all of this, and how he continued to preach.
Mm-hmm. That became his main bread and butter.
He continued to talk about this whole situation, and instead of saying how these folks kidnapped him, he turned that around like any good preacher would. These Baptist preachers, they can turn any story around. He turned that around and said, God saved my life. God spared my life. So I would want him to talk about that. I think I would want to hear him preach that sermon. Mm-hmm. My grandmother got so tired of him talking about that sermon. Her name was Margaret Page, and we called her Big Mama. And so Big Mama got tired of hearing that sermon. But I think I would want to hear that sermon.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. If
you could spend the day with another popular author, who would you choose?
Ooh. I'm going to say one that's kind of easy but true. Mm-hmm. Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
I mean, she went through so much. Mm-hmm. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Mm-hmm. That's the poem of that. And then the book itself. And then her Phenomenal Woman, phenomenally. I want to just quote it and all kinds of things. But I would definitely say another writer would be Maya Angelou.
Okay.
Just the wisdom there.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. If this book were made into a movie, who would star in it?
Ooh, okay. You know what? I have actually dabbled in acting.
Oh. We're going to see you on the big screen.
I might play, like a little itty-bitty role in it. That would be great. Uh-huh. But who would play my grandfather? I don't know. That would be... Of course, I would love someone like Denzel Washington to play him. Mm-hmm. And Denzel's kind of getting up there in age. Maybe he could, look like a grandfather or something like that and do this thing.
They could age him, too. They could change his look a little bit. I like that. I like Denzel. I think that's a good answer.
I don't know.
He's got a great voice.
Yes. And his father was a preacher. Isn't he the son of a pastor, like a Pentecostal pastor or something?
I would not be surprised.
He could get that pastor cadence down, that preaching cadence at the end, where they're, Yep. He could do it.
Where's a place you would like to travel that you've never been?
Oh, gosh. So I do like to travel.
It seems like you've been a lot of places from what I read in the book.
Mm-hmm. And so for me, I probably would say South Africa.
Okay.
Just because my last trip to Africa, I went to Uganda and took a boating trip down the Nile River. And it was like one of the highlights, even though I actually can't swim. It's I was on this boat and these rapids.
Was it a big boat? Was it a big boat?
It's a long story, but it was a boat and these fierce rapids on the Nile
River.
River.
Things in that Nile River that I don't want to meet.
Yeah, the Nile doesn't play.
Yeah,
okay.
Right. There's probably anaconda down there.
But I just had such an experience there. I think I would have such an experience in South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can fans reach you, Sharon?
Well, they can reach me at SharonTubbs.com. So I have a website at SharonTubbs.com, and it has all my books and different opportunities that I offer and events and things like that. So I would love to be contacted. You can click there. There's a Contact Us place, and I will receive the email and look forward to hearing from folks.
I like it. Thank you, Sharon, for joining us on Pages and Voices. It's been an honor to have you here today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
I can't wait to see what's next for you.
Yes.
And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. I'm Meg Bell, your host of the ACPL Local Author Podcast, brought to you by the Allen County Public Library. If you enjoyed this podcast, please show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends and family. Your support means everything to us.